In this video, I'm going to draw a bunch of characters from the new Zelda game and talk about how I make them unique to me and how I sort of imbue, is that the word? Imbue my style? Listen, I'm going to talk about how I draw things in my own style, and I'm going to use some Zelda characters to do that. If that sounds interesting to you, you are in the right place. If you're new to this channel, my name is Chris Piascik. I've been a professional illustrator for the past 12 years. I've worked with clients like Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Nike, Adidas, Google, and tons more. On this channel, I talk about illustration stuff. So, I don't know. Let's go draw some Zelda stuff. So when I'm stylizing characters, I try to find what is unique about them and really accentuate that and sort of minimize the things that aren't unique. So obviously Link has these elfy big ears, so I'm exaggerating them, making them even bigger. His eyes are pretty big, but they're sort of got that anime vibe, which is not the way I draw, so I sort of try to mesh that with my own style, and I like buggy eyes. So instead of doing normal buggy eyes, I'm just making them a little more squat so they sort of fit the same. And I just try to make them a little bit more expressive. My characters I feel like are pretty expressive, and Link is, pretty subdued here, so I'm just trying to take what I see and accentuate it a little bit more. So with his hair, he's got this normal hair pushed to the side, but Link is doing battle, he's doing all this crazy stuff, so I'm messing it up, trying to make it just feel a little bit more dramatic and, I don't know, playful to sort of match my style. The style of Link in the game is a little bit more sort of real and normal, and I'm just playing this up. I'm working with these T-Boz sideburns, T-Boz from TLC, if in the 90s, if you don't get 90s R&B references. I'm just sketching quickly and just playing around and not trying to stay too long on one thing. I'm just trying to get shapes out. And then I just keep making new layers and drawing on top of the previous layer, just trying to tighten it up a little bit as I go. And this helps me to just sort of feel it out and just think while drawing, if that makes sense. So I like this sort of side smile thing. I think it makes him look a little cheekier, a little bit more, I don't know, ready to do battle. He looks a little more, I don't know, like he's not ready to take on Ganon in these pictures. And I'm trying to, make him a little tougher, a little more badass, and giving him a 90s heavy metal singer vibe with this hair and this side look, paired with 90s R&B T-Boz sideburns, if you will. Noticing this ear is a little crooked, so I'm just making all these little tweaks as I go. And again, I'm trying to focus on what makes Link unique from anyone else or any other character, and really push that part of him while not really worrying about the rest. You'll see the nose, I just drew a very simple, plain, small nose, because the nose is not something that stands out on Link as a character. And I'm just fine-tuning as I go, as I mentioned, and trying to get these hair shapes. So his hair is, a little bit more real, but there's chunks to it, and that matches with the way that I draw things. So I'm just playing up these angles and pushing them over and trying to have it flow kind of naturally. And as you can see, it's starting to look more like my own drawing, but still resemble Link. You can tell that they're the same character, just drawn in a different style. So at this point, I've decided my sketch is in a good place, and I'm just gonna go in and tighten it up. So I'm just following my sketch relatively closely, but I'm also fine-tuning as I go. So if you look, you'll see it doesn't exactly follow the lines. I'm just sort of using those as a guide and improvising. And one other thing you may have noticed is I turned off the reference at this point, because I like to sort of use the reference as I'm sketching and watch it, but then after I get a sketch that's close enough, sometimes I find it helpful, especially when I'm trying to do things in my own style, to just turn off that reference altogether and just work from my sketch, because I know my sketch referenced that initial drawing. So if I just use that, I'm not distracted by trying to make it look like the reference image. I'm just trying to tighten up my version of Link at that point. So I think another thing that really differentiates my work and my style is my use of color. So I'm referencing the color that's used in Link, and then I'm just sort of punching it up a little bit, making a little bit more vibrant from what he has. And also, I use flat colors. He's got a lot of different tones in his hair, so I'm minimizing that, just sort of picking a little bit more of a pink than the pale skin tone he has. Just sort of punching things up. I like to add in like little details, like, you know, making him have a red nose, just sort of a fun little thing to make the character a little bit more unique and have a little bit of variety. If you've seen my other work, you know that I often will put in like a subtle shadow with just like a light purple going in. And it's not like a gradation shadow or like a real rendered shadow. It's just sort of shapes, flat shapes like the way I draw, but just sort of giving a little bit of depth and a little bit of separation. I think it just, you know, is a way to accentuate different features, like having the shadow under the eyebrows helps give that, like, I don't know, angry vibe a little bit. I'm not trying to make him too angry, but like, you know, he's an elf who's about to do battle. I think he's an elf. If he's not an elf, you can let me know in the comments and tell me that I'm an idiot, because I could very well be. But he's got elf ears. Let's be real. Then a couple little white highlights and we're good to go. Okay, so here we got the Bogoblin. So I got my Bogoge. We got some obvious features here. We've got this like pig nose and these big ears. So I'm starting with the pig nose, moving it up a little bit, just sort of exaggerating that, putting it towards like the top, then going in with the eyes. This thing sort of has buggy eyes to begin with, so I'm gonna accentuate that. Also, I'm gonna make the mouth a little bit more in line with the kind of mouth that I draw. Just sort of silly, a little more open, a little bit slightly more aggressive, and then just, you know, these big ears. We're all about ears in this game. And then the horn on top of his head, and, you know, those are the main features of this character. I do kind of like that the horn looks a little bit like a birthday hat, if you will. You know, this one is a little bit easier because it's like a monster, and this character already is sort of in line with the kind of weird stuff that I draw. And I find it to be easier to stylize monster animal type things than actual people. When you're stylizing people, or elves if you will, the differences between the different characters is a little more subtle. There's a little bit more nuance. You have to really sort of play up the features that make them unique. Whereas something like this, like a monster or an animal, they're a little bit more distinct. Maybe if I was trying to differentiate between two different Bobikins, that would be different, but I'm just doing a general Baki. I'm doing a general Baki here. Doing something like this in my own style is pretty natural. I'm just working with round, smooth line work that is typical in my work, and just drawing, you know, the shapes that make this character unique, and like playing up the bug eyes, playing up the pig nose. I keep saying the pig nose, but that's a very important feature of this. If I was to stylize this and minimize the nose, like we minimized the nose in Zelda, clearly wouldn't stand out as much as, you know, clearly being one of these characters, because that's what makes it unique. I've minimized the overall shape of the head, because the head isn't really, like the overall shape of the head is not an important feature of this thing. It's more about the ears and the pig nose and the eyes and the fangs and like the big mouth. So everything else can just take a back seat, if that makes sense. I'm also trying to find places where I can do the things that I would do normally with like other characters that I draw, and figure out ways that I can work them into another character that won't make it not look like that character. So for example, this mouth is very typical of a mouth that I would draw on other characters, but I can do it on this character and it just works fine because this character just has a big mouth with fangs. There's nothing else unique about its mouth or the shape of its head that would make this not suitable. All right, so now we're gonna have to stylize something that is not a character. It's a thing. What I'm trying to do here is the same thing I would do with a character, and that's highlight what makes it different. So we're dealing with a sword here, but like what makes this sword different from other swords? So we've got this sort of like very dynamic handle with these like angles. So I'm accentuating these. Like as you can see in my version, I'm making them more dramatic, like the curve, that like half moon shape, all very dramatic. And I'm minimizing the handle, making it a little bit shorter, simplifying the bottom part of it, because that's not really unique. That could be any sword. So once I've done like a rough sketch, figuring out what are the important details, I'll stop looking as closely at the reference unless I need to like figure out how something works. So for me, I'm just trying to see where the bottom of these things connect, because maybe that is important to determine. And then just sort of going into the details and trying to figure out like what I want to show And like for me, I'm going to simplify this spot because it's not that important and it's not a crucial feature. So again, wherever I can simplify things that aren't important, that's what I'm doing. Like here on the bottom of the handle, minimizing that, just putting these X's in, and then we got to obviously get the Triforce in. That's a crucial element. So I'm going to do like an outline for the shape of the sword, but I'm going to rebuild it with that sort of like, I don't know, whatever this magic stuff is that looks like it's fixing the broken Master Sword. And I'm just trying to make like my own interpretation of this like circuitry or lines or whatever it really is, and just trying to do like a more simple version of it to like fill this out. So I'll get that pretty close. And now I'm gonna go in and do my tightened up line work, just like I did for the other characters, following pretty closely. But, you know, if I need to tweak where necessary, that is fine. This is also one of those situations where someone might use like a symmetry tool to make it perfect on both sides because it's sort of a symmetrical thing. But I find that for my style, having it slightly imperfect and having it, you know, a little bit different on each side adds some unique character to it and makes it part of my style. That's why I don't really like symmetry for the way that I work. So as I'm redrawing these like magic light line things, following kind of closely, but I also am simplifying it even more. I felt like my sketch had a little too much detail and I want this to read relatively small. So I'm minimizing that detail as much as I can and just sort of simplifying it, but just trying to get it to match the overall shape of the sword. So I'm just sort of making this up as I go and figuring it out. As you can see here, like I'm not referencing the image at all. I'd like have the vibe for what this looks like, and that's enough. So go in and color this, and because I'm doing these as like a set for like a pattern, I want the colors to be the same. Like I want there to be a consistent color palette. So I brought Link in here so that I could take his hair color and use that as the gold in the sword. And then instead of this random blue that I chose from the reference image, I'm going to use the blue from the Bubblekin's eyes. Go and finish up this handle, do the same sort of shading that I did on the others, and that's pretty much it. So like when I'm doing an object or a sword like this, I'm treating it the same way I would any other character, or even type, to be honest. I'm just trying to like figure out what makes it unique and highlight that feature and minimize the things that aren't important. So I thought maybe I would just do a quick type treatment of Zelda, just sort of loosely copying it and then just making it a little bit more unique to me, but just something that sort of feels cohesive with the rest of these elements. And as you can see here with all the different elements that I've made, I'm using that same consistent color palette. Like when I was coloring the Master Sword, I brought Link in to reference that color. So with all of the items here, even the small things like the broken arrow and like the little Triforces, I'm using the same line work, the same line weight, the same colors, and it makes it all feel cohesive and all feel like my style. Style is just sort of a combination of all these different things coming together and like, you know, what makes what you do different from other people. Just in the way that like what makes this character different from another character, or what makes this person look different from any other person. So for me, my work is very 2D, very line-based, flat colors, semi-minimal palettes. Even though it's colorful, I use bright colors, but I don't use a lot of colors. Just those things alone are enough to sort of make it feel cohesive to me. And then it's just sort of like the way that I draw things and figuring out how I can make things unique to me while still representing what makes that character different from other characters. So I don't know how helpful this was, but hopefully this shines a little bit of light on how I create things in my own style. Let me know in the comments if you found this helpful, or if you have any other questions about style or anything like that, or any other questions in general. I had a lot of fun drawing these Zelda characters. It was fun to dive back into this thing that I loved a long time ago that I haven't really visited in a long time. And to be honest, it kind of makes me want to get the game, but I'm a little worried about trusting myself with a video game. It could get out of control. Bobo Bakken, Bobo Boko Boblin, Boko Boblin, Bakablin, 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 Bakoblin, Bakablin, 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 Bogo Gay, Bakoblins, Baki. I'm doing a general Baki here.